Good evening, all. Such a pleasure and privilege to be here. It's, despite what Professor Mohanty said, it's a little strange space for me. Not because you are strange. I feel it's a tradition which I'm outside of. So I look at technology in a different way. And before I was speaking today, I was really looking forward to hearing Andrew Feinberg. I hope he still joins us. Somebody whom I've learned a lot from. And one of the things Andrew's engaging with his work taught me, despite him being one of the last great critical theory scholars of the 20th century, one thing which goes against some of the giants of that you could say a school, is not to take the values which are residing in technology for granted as something which is unitary. And he makes, through 3 or 4 important books, how we could repopulate values. And I don't want to rehearse that argument, of course. Today, I come from a tradition which is termed as science and technology studies. And it was very heartening and encouraging to hear that the colloquium here this year was thinking about technology and society as it's encouraging because technology as a site of theorization is not very common within India. We do look at social implications, social impact, and so on, but to think about technology in a theoretical sense, it's I'm not saying it's absent, but it's not very common. And since last year, we have been starting a space of some kind, trying to foster serious critical theoretical engagement with science and technology, or the Science and Technology in India network, Science and Technology Studies in India network. So in that sense, that's quite encouraging when I heard about this. Today what I want to do is to, the 10 minutes which I probably have now, is to do a quick snapshot of how to unpack, for me, this idea of visions and visioning. Techno-scientific visions and visioning. And I think I would need to make 3 or 4 moves, which I come to in a second. But why is visions or visioning interesting and relevant for us? I mean, it's just like, last year, if you go through India in the road and you end up in petrol pumps, you'll see the big man looking at you with something or the other, every petrol bunk. And now, whenever I switch on the radio, I hear Viksit Bharat. It took me some weeks to understand what does that word mean. There's a particular understanding of development, and the Indian state is recognized generally as a developmental state, and increasingly the developmental state is a technological state. And this word which is circulated again and again, and we still haven't seen the document. I don't know how many of you have engaged with that. We have this new vision of India at 2047. 100 years after the political independence, right? And we only get snippets. It's just like the rest of the state, right? You get snippet here. This is what we are going to say. This is what we are going to say. But we haven't seen the document yet. Apparently, Niti Aayog was supposed to bring it out by December of last year. It's still not out. But the ambition and claim seems to be that we are going to be a developed country by 2047. And what does that mean? A $3 trillion economy. And so many other things. There is a lot of smatterings of green involved. And then there is...
it will be more like 30 trillion.
35, sorry. What am I saying? 35. I get my numbers wrong a lot of times. I'm sorry about that. But so you have the familiar words of AI and all sorts of, blockchain and whatnot, right? The IoT. So you take any sort of a social arena, you would see a technological arena. That seems to be and that's nothing new in some ways. If you look at the earlier vision document of 2035, done by, this is the 2047 documents done by Niti Aayog, or so it seems. We haven't seen it yet, but the earlier document was by this autonomous body called TIFAC. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. Technology, I've written it down, it's quite a mouthful. Information forecasting and assessment. It's something which they were working on from 2009 onwards, and it came out in 2000, the cusp of 14. And then there was some difficulty with accepting it, anything old, and it took a couple of years, and then finally the dispensation came out with this vision of 2035. All this to say that we have a long number of vision documents which we come out. And how do we think about it as a site of theorization? That's what I want to look at today. Yeah, and one way to look at it is like that billboard in the petrol pump, right? You just sort of look at it and say, yeah. I mean, it's in some ways some of us who was trained in alternate law, we used to scoff at liberal constitutions, but now I've changed my mind about that. Documents have values, visions have values, dreams. I mean, it was funny. I mean, I was coming in my car driving, and my radio station went something like this afternoon. The dreams make us, they get a hold on us. I can't sing, but it was quite funny. It went on, the song went on, dreams make us, and they get a hold on us. And how do we tie something like this, a visioning, to a technological society? That's what I want to do, right? For that, in an audience like this, I need to unpack the idea of technology from which I come. And maybe it's a great Indian tradition of starting with what it is not. Yeah, nati, right? And it's definitely not the idea of this common sense idea of technology as an application of science. Yeah, it could be sometimes application of an existing scientific theory, no doubt, but the traditions I come from think of it as a structuring of particular kinds of social relations, which gets concretized in a particular way. And this is nothing new, right? There's a vast tract of sociological and historical literature which thinks about technology in this way. Yeah, but for instance, if I want to make a very broad, what comes first? Does the bulb come first? Or does Edison come first, or Maxwell come first? You see, Edison comes first. What is, would steam engine come first, or would it be thermodynamics? You end up historically, you see that it's a steam engine. So contrary to popular conception of technology as something which is an application of science, as a scientific rationality, you could end up with other notions of technology. And all this to say that we could think about technology in a way which is not... So there are two things which comes to your mind. If I ask a class of engineers, undergrad engineers, one is application of science, right? The other one is it makes it more efficient, makes it more rational. Yeah? And then if you start looking at historical examples, you see a lot of technical change is irrational, can be inefficient, yeah? Because it's political. A lot of times technical change can be political. Then what do we do with that insight when we start to recognize that I'm going to move from technical change to socio-technical change, and that's because of where I come from, where we think of technology as a network of social relations. I don't have the time to elaborate on that, but all this to say that once we take technosocial change seriously as something which structures society, and the question then would be, how do we understand agency? In classical political science, you have this difficulty between structure and agency. And then you end up somewhere in between for some people. Some others would stick to their corners. And you have a similar sort of continuum when you look at technology studies. You end up with where does agency stay? And then you would end up with someone like Langdon Winner, who would say we could think of technology as having political properties inherently. It's not that we use it politically, but it's also inherently political. So you would end up with a certain kinds of agency which technologically determined. Society is structured by technology. And on the other end, you would have far less concrete ideas of technology, which would want to recognize the labile way in which technology can work in different social contexts. And yet, not denying the inherent values which a technical system could have. Yeah, so there is this continuum in which, and I don't want to take a position there, all this to say that once we move away from the common sense of technology as essentialist, and this is something again which we could go to mid-20th century European theory, which goes on to 30, 40 years, you would see a certain claim of essentialism in technology, which is increasingly difficult to hold on to, because we could think of ways in which we can have even as we agree that technologies have values, we don't need to agree that technologies will only have one set of values. We end up discussing a lot on techno-capitalism because one set of actors in society has captured the technical domain in a particular way and the way we understand technical rationality. Yeah. So all this to say then that we have an idea available for us of socio-technical change which is not necessarily tied to a scientific rationality or a rationality about economic efficiency, optimality, and so on. We could have other kinds of technologies possible then. And that also takes us then back to the question of how does technologies become technologies? How do you understand technological changes in technique? Yeah. So we end up with that question. And we could have multiple answers. But we know this. Ideas make the world. Yeah. Yes, we can have an argument about it by saying that it's hardcore materialists would say no, materials make ideas possible, and that's something, yeah. But here, if we go with the idea that ideas make the world, then visions matter. Our ideas about technologies matter. Visioning matters. Yeah, and then I have 20 seconds to say that we have a wealth of ways in which techniques through which visioning has been done in the last 70 years of trying to influence not downstream, upstream ways in which development of technology is conceived even before so we have science fiction, right? We have a lot of battles happening in science fiction where we try to understand where does the future humanity lies. So science fiction is a site of imagination, and just like the imagination of rationality, efficiency has captured technology in a certain way. But if we can vision differently, what would that be? We have a 30, 40 years tradition of visioning by status bodies. But increasingly, we also have had experiments like Vikalp Sangam. I don't know how many of you have heard of it. The VS modes since 2014 have been looking at various ways in which, and this is not the first time, we have had a tradition of grassroots organizations coming together and thinking about technology in different ways outside of status bodies. So the challenge then is, Prasamohanty, just give me a couple of minutes, please. I have just built it up till here, right? So yeah. So given that we have multiple kinds of techniques in expert bodies, and yet we have other ways in which we have got. If you look at the example of the NBSAP, the National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan.
2 minutes?
Yes, yeah. From 2004 onwards, around 2,500 groups came together in multiple parts of the country, and we came up with a document by 2006. Then the government chickened out. And then within 2 years, they got an apology of a strategic acquisition. But what happened with that, the failure of status spaces to recognize a particular kind of visioning was also, we have a very thriving organic movement now. They were all part of that visioning. So all this to say that visioning, there is a particular way in which we can think about visioning outside of expert domains. Yeah, and we also end up then with questions like, so these are all process. What are the kind of values we want to have in those technologies? That's for another day then. Thank you.
Thank you very much.